Your second failure is turning around halfway up the hill to the Big Buddha after chemo.
Yes.
So you were in Thailand and you'd completed your chemotherapy.
That's right. Yeah.
Tell us about the Big Buddha.
So, yeah, I started chemo, when was it? It was 22nd of December, I think it was, end of December, 4 months. And then I was away, I think 3 days after my final round of chemo, end of March. We went away to Hong Kong and then Thailand with the family. First time to see a bit of sunshine. I'd been in this, it was such a dark time of the year, dark mentally with the diagnosis, and the chemo was tough, really tough. And so it was just getting away to the blue skies and the warmth, and it was amazing. But physically, I was very diminished and battered, and I was just keen to get out on the bike. I'd been on the indoor bike every day in the gym, just doing very short, very gentle sessions, just turning my legs over. But this was the first time I was going to go out on the roads, fresh air. I was going to get back to fitness, and I was really looking forward to it. And the first morning, we were staying in Phuket, down at the south end of the island, very, very hilly. Like literally, there were no flat roads, just either up or down. And I headed out at sunrise. It was about 5:45. It was already 28, 29 degrees and humid. And it became apparent immediately that I wasn't going to do that well. I was struggling just to keep upright, pedaling along, going up the first hill out of the hotel. My heart rate went through the roof. And I was just like, oh my God, this isn't what I imagined it was going to be, this amazing, beautiful ride. And I was going to feel great and come back and start the day on the front foot. But I found myself at the bottom of this big hill, and there's a Buddha on top of the hill. It's called the Big Buddha, this big, white, massive big Buddha that sits on top of this fairly high hill, about 350, 380 meters, I think it is, above sea level. And I set off trying to get to the top. I thought, this seems like a sensible option. First day back on the bike, I'll go and ride up a massive, bloody great hill, having just come out of chemotherapy. And I was really struggling at the bottom of the hill. I thought maybe I'll settle into it, but as I got higher up the hill, it got worse. And then, I was getting chased by these stray dogs, and it was just, everything was just stressful. And I got halfway up, and it got so steep that I literally couldn't keep going. I was just, the heart rate was at maximum. I felt like I was just, utterly deflated, and I stopped, and I turned around and went back down the hill. And I've never quit halfway up a hill before. I'm not a mountain climber, I'm a track cyclist, but we still did a fair bit of training on road and on hills. And it was so symbolic that I'd given up, and I just felt utterly deflated. And I came back to the hotel at breakfast. The kids were up. We were going down to get get breakfast. Beautiful day, beautiful hotel, lovely pool, sitting eating breakfast. But my head was down, my morale was down. And Sarah was, obviously could tell, and she's, what's up? And I said, oh, nothing, I just didn't have a great ride, and I, had to stop on this hill. And she's like, oh, you'll be fine. But she could tell that I wasn't. And then for the rest of the week, I tried to just get out every day, keep riding, and knowing that it wouldn't change anything physically. I'm not going to get fit in a week. You don't change your physiology doesn't turn around in a week. But as I was throughout the week, and as I was doing more riding, I reflected back, and I looked at the data on my little computer on the bike, and it shows you your GPS and it shows you the route. And I realized that on the hill to the Big Buddha, I'd stopped at the steepest part. So there was basically a hairpin that I came to, and I stopped. But if I'd got round that hairpin, I would have realized the hill would have gone from a really steep gradient to a slightly less steep gradient, but I might have been able to hang in there. So it gave me just the confidence to think, I'm going to have another go at this. I'm going to come back on the last day and see if I can get up it. So I did, and I came back, and it was exactly the same. My heart rate was through the roof. I was struggling. I was suffering. It was awful. The stray dogs were barking and chasing me. And I got to that part where I gave up, and I just thought, I don't need to think about the rest of this hill. I just need to get around the corner here, and it'll ease. And I got around this hairpin corner, and it went from, 1 in 5 or whatever climb it was to a 1 in 6, just enough that it was bearable. And I kept going, and I made it to the top. And so insignificant. There were no medals, there were no crowds to cheer you. That didn't mean anything. But to me, it meant everything. It was this moment where I realized it was, yeah, quite symbolic to have got to the top of this hill. And ironically, it's called Mount Knackered.
I mean, that is the
Genuinely,
best payoff ever.
I was knackered, and it was Mount Knackered. It was amazing. And so yeah, I stood there at the top of the hill at sunrise at about 7:00, and there were a few tourists there, and I think, they look at this absolutely beetroot faced, sweaty tourist on a bike, thinking, what, I felt like I was, wanting to punch the air and celebrate. It was significant. So yeah, I guess the lesson I learned there is that when you're going through a really tough time and you just think you can't go on, you don't have to think too far ahead. Just think, all you got to do is just one more step, one more pedal rev, one more day, and it might ease. And if it eases, then you can hang in there. It's just, yeah, don't think too far ahead. Focus on right here, right now. Can you do one more? And one more minute. It's the same approach I had during chemo when I had the ice cap on my head and I was suffering with that. You don't think about the fact it could be 4 hours. You just think, can I do one more minute? And if the answer is yes, then you do one more minute, and then you repeat that over and over again. And then before you know it, you've made it to the end, and you realize I didn't think I could do that, but I did.
So meaningful and so moving hearing you talk about it. And that mindset that you approached both to the bike ride and to the chemo, the mindset of an elite athlete, I would love to hear a bit more about that, because again, in your book, I think it's the first time I've read what the reality of chemo actually is. I mean, you're very open about the fact that you're someone with a high pain threshold. You've won all of these gold medals, but chemo was one of the toughest battles you had to set that mindset to get through it.
Yes, I'm very keen, I want to make it clear, I don't want to scare people, because, today people listening to this podcast may well be about to go through chemo themselves or one of their loved ones. I don't want to scare people off. And there's so many different types of chemo, the different methods there's tablets, there's infusion, there's different strengths, there's different toxicities. Everybody's different. And it's necessary, and it does work. Well, for me, it's worked really well, so it's important that, I don't want to put people off. In essence, chemo was difficult, but it wasn't necessarily the infusion of the medicine that was the hard part. It was this bloody ice cap, which I didn't even have to wear. So it's there to try and freeze the hair follicles and then minimize your hair loss or risk of losing your hair. And then you also have ice mittens and ice sort of socks that go on to try and freeze your fingertips and your toes, and then that reduces the risk of neuropathy and losing the sense of touch in your fingers and toes. So I can't remember what the temperature of the ice cap is. It's minus 27, I think, Celsius for the hands and feet, which is pretty grim. But there's something about the ice cap which it's not just the temperature, it's the tension that was strapped on and then really tightened up. So it feels like your head's in a vice. And immediately it's not just uncomfortable, it's kind of painful. And then they switch it on, and this gel gets pumped through the whole cap and then out the other side. So it's kept at this into machine, which is then refrozen back in again. So it keeps your head at this minus whatever. And as soon as it switches on, it's like, oh my God, this is awful. And you're just trying to, right, okay, they say the first 10 minutes are the worst, so just hang in here. It's, it'll settle. And it doesn't really, it's just really uncomfortable. But the reason I did it, it wasn't, it made, as I say, it made no difference it wasn't for treating, it was purely to try and keep your hair, which for two reasons. First of all, if you lose your hair suddenly, and it was one of these things that we were trying to keep it out of the public eye initially. And that would have been an obvious indicator that something was up, that was being treated for something. But most importantly, it was Callum. So my little boy, we had a couple of friends who'd been through cancer treatment already, and he'd noticed that they'd lost their hair, and he was interested initially about that when it happened, and I think a little bit scared about it as well. So when we told Callum and Chloe about my diagnosis and that I was getting chemotherapy, that was the first question he had was, are you going to lose your hair? And it became quite a big thing for him. I think he was worried that it was going to suddenly disappear. I'd have it in the morning as he went off to school, and then he'd come back from school, or I'd pick him up at school and I'd have no hair. And I said, well, there's things we can do. And so he was very keen that I did use the ice cap but it was tough. It was really tough. I had it on, I think, for anything from between about an hour and 40 up to 4 hours. I think the second or third round was 4 hours. And it genuinely felt like torture at the time. And it's not just the physical pain. It's the fact you're so depleted emotionally when you start it. At the first round, I think it was only maybe 2 months after diagnosis. I was still reeling from the shock of it all. And then you're just suddenly, you find yourself sitting there, you're walking into a room, there's a chair, there's the bag with all the, the medication in it, there's your cap and all. And you get this moment of, hang on a minute, how did I get here? What's happening? All of a sudden, I'm a cancer patient, I'm receiving chemotherapy. How did it come to this? And it's almost like a sort of a slap in the face of, how did I get to this situation? And you feel sorry for yourself. And that was one of the lowest points, I think, sitting in the chair, just feeling utterly miserable, feeling the pain of the hands and feet and the ice cap, and just feeling really sorry for myself. And it was, but at that point, again, like you're saying, the kind of sporting mindset, you have to snap out of that and you have to choose how you're going to approach it. And I thought about my Uncle Andy, my great Uncle Andy, who was a prisoner of war in Japan in the Second World War. Some of the horrendous things that he went through and he endured, it just made me think, again, snap out of it and realize I'm sitting in a hospital we've got the right medicine, we've got amazing treatment, we've got amazing nurses and doctors. I've got treatment for this condition. I'm lucky to be here. I have to get through just one more minute. And then when that seconds hand went round and got back to 12, one more minute. And before you know it, there's bits within that 4-hour period that you were gripping the chair and it wasn't pleasant at all. And you were grinding your teeth. But by the end of it, the cap comes off and you're grateful that you got through it and you didn't give up.
I think what comes across so clearly there is that idea of just feeling out of sync almost. So you're an Olympic athlete 1 minute and then the next minute you have this cold cap, you're going through chemotherapy. And I know that this is partly why you are so passionate about early detection. And I think it's a measure of the respect and love with which you're held by this nation, that when you chose to go public about your diagnosis, the number of men who sought a PSA test for early detection was up 700%. There's been a near 8-fold increase in NHS searches for prostate cancer symptoms over the days after your diagnosis, after you went public about it. Why is this so important for you?
Because I think lives can be saved. It's that simple. In this country, it's if you're under the age of 50 and you go to your GP and ask for a PSA test, the chances are they'll say, come back when you're 50. There's reasons for that, and I understand it. And I know it costs money, and I know that the tests aren't always conclusive, but it's better than nothing. And particularly if you have family history of any prostate cancer. So my grandpa died from prostate cancer. My dad's had it. So it's a genetic thing for my family. So, I should have tested myself earlier. I should have gone in for screening earlier. It's not about me. I'm not saying poor me or blaming anybody for my situation at all. But I just feel like you look at France. In France, the age limit is 40. Once you hit 40, then they start screening. I just feel like we could save countless lives. And also, if you catch it early, like a lot of cancers, it's actually quite treatable. But if you leave it until it's gone too far, there's nothing you can do. So it seems like an obvious solution. And yeah, it's more than that as well. I think it's men, our attitude to going to the doctor. We only go if our leg's fallen off or if, something horrendous has happened. We will do anything other than book an appointment to see our GP and get checked out for anything. So it's not just prostate cancer. It's just taking care of yourself. And instead of prioritizing, obviously we prioritize our families and work and other things, but put yourself on that list and make sure that you put time in your week or month or year to go and get checked out, because it's it only takes, it can take an hour or a few minutes. I mean, a blood test takes, literally a few seconds, but it could change your life.
I hope you enjoyed that video. Be sure to check out the full episode of How to Fail wherever you get your podcasts. And also make sure you're following us on social media for all the latest updates.